am what you might call a Christmas nerd. Or maybe a sap, whatever, I don't care. When I was a kid, I remember looking in the front of the hymnal and counting up the number of Sundays of Pentecost, 27 by the way, so that I could essentially start an Advent countdown in June. I have ranked the various Cambridge Singers albums, and I know which ones are my favorite versions of various hymns. I look forward to obscure medieval Christmas hymns showing up in my playlist alongside the mashup version of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen and We Three Kings, done by 90s icon Sarah McLachlan and the Bare Naked Ladies, which is fabulous if you haven't heard it. I love walking down Main Street under the lights. I'm not so much into buying loads of stuff, but I get really excited if I know I found a gift someone will really like or need. But as an adult, I have to admit that some of my enthusiasm has waned a little. The pressure to do everything right and be merry is intense, and there's extreme dissonance between all that I know is going on and the overly cheery messaging I get from the store advertising that now starts earlier and earlier. We went into DSW to get our son a pair of new sneakers the day after Halloween, and they were already playing Christmas carols, and not good ones. I felt so bad for the staff. At this time of year, there is intense pressure to be happy. Never mind that if you're a student, finals are coming and life feels like the last lap in Mario Kart where the music gets fast and everything is really stressful. Never mind that maybe you've suffered a loss or you're feeling lonely or sad or angry. And even if you're not feeling out of step in your personal life, the world certainly doesn't seem like it's full of goodness and light. There are so many things: climate change, war, poverty, to be angry, upset, or worried about, most, if not all of which none of us can conquer on our own. But the songs that are now playing on loop everywhere we go admonish us to be of good cheer. Wouldn't want to ruin it for everyone else, right? But what if the people around you, the ones whose Christmas experience you're trying so hard to respect, are also broken? What if they're also struggling or stressed or angry or in despair? What if you're not the only one? What if we could acknowledge the fact that this pain persists, even as we're being told we need to aspire to a cheeriness that reflects all being merry and bright? The commercial version of Christmas would love to feed us a line that says that Jesus came into this world and made everything perfect. The story has become so commonly known that we forget all the obvious elements. He was born to an unwed mother who, under the law of the land, might have been stoned to death for her transgression. His parents were forced to travel when his mother was in her late pregnancy, and she, a terrified young woman who had never done this before and who lived in a time of extraordinarily high maternal mortality, bore her first child without the comfort of even a proper building. And then Jesus and his parents were forced to flee into Egypt to escape a king who was suspicious of all baby boys under the age of 2 and ordered his army to murder every last one. Jesus was not born into a perfect world. You could say he was born into chaos. Jesus, who was born into poverty and stress and who ultimately died on a cross, was executed publicly as a criminal. Jesus broke into not a perfect world, but that world. A world in which famine and disease were regular realities, in which vaccines didn't exist, in which child mortality was high, and in which widows and orphans were stripped of their rights and made to fend entirely for themselves. A world in which war was a constant threat. Jesus breaks into that world. Jesus breaks into our stressful, broken, imperfect, and painful world. Jesus doesn't wait for things to be perfect and peaceful or for the perfect conditions to arise so that his coming can be appropriately accepted. Jesus comes into a world that is suffering and broken. God, wanting to know what it feels like to be us, came into our world in the midst of a time of great upheaval, not when it was safe, not when every last thing was in its rightful place, but at a time when they were needed. And Jesus breaks into our lives, not when we're ready, not when we've decided it's the right time, when perhaps things are the most difficult, when we don't feel like we've got time for him, when we're feeling stressed or angry. Jesus breaks into our lives, not when we're ready, but when he's needed. Jesus doesn't wait. Jesus comes on God's time, not on ours. We expect things to be perfect this time of year. We're expected to hold to impossible ideals, buy all the perfect presents, decorate perfectly, cook the perfect meals that everyone enjoys, and also relax and enjoy it all because nobody wants to be around someone who's stressed out. Don't get so caught up in creating the perfect time that you're actually stressed out. If you're stressed, you're also failing. But that is our cultural Christmas time. That is not the life that Jesus is calling us to. Contrary to the marketing schedule, it isn't actually the Christmas season yet. It's Advent. a time of waiting and expecting and hoping. Advent is hope in the midst of despair. Advent is hope in the midst of exam anxiety, in the midst of worries about whether you're going to be able to meet all your end of term deadlines, in the midst of wondering whether your best is going to be good enough. Advent is hope in the midst of time when the world is shaking, when the foundations seem to be crumbling, when we can't figure out where to turn. Advent is a time of waiting for Christ to come, for peace to reign, for God's will to be done. And Advent is a time of expectation that this world, God's world, will be made new, that pain will cease and war will end, that we will be one with each other and serve each other in love. Advent is a time when we look for the sparks of beauty that are here, all around us, perhaps hidden only because we're too busy to notice them. The leaves are gone, and the trees are asleep for the winter, but the dropped leaves have made it possible to see the elegant framework of branches that sustain the life, not just of the trees, but of the animals and insects that make their homes there. People are dying in Gaza and Ukraine. Fires and floods wreak havoc on our land and ecosystems. Our conversations are filled with vitriol as we can't seem to agree on what is basic and true. But every day, people are getting up and choosing to make the world a better place despite the enormity of the suffering they see. Look at the beauty surrounding us and know that it will fill this earth. There is a reason we put up lights at this time of year, and it's not to send our brains signals that we really need to go out and frantically buy stuff. Light gives hope and creates beauty in a time of deep darkness. It's the same reason the Scandinavian practice a tradition of hygge, which involves lighting lots of candles and celebrating the cozy indoor time that comes with long nights and cold weather. The lights create beauty at a time when darkness is at its peak, reminding us that though we must journey through this time of darkness, we can still acknowledge that the light will shine in it and that the darkness has not overcome it. Hope is a powerful force, the force that counters the despondency that comes when we are faced with despair. Hope is God's gift to us in this time of waiting and expectation. Even though we may be feeling frightened or stressed, angry or sad, Jesus reminds us that we belong to God and we can have the confidence to lift up our heads, expectantly anticipating the arrival of the Prince of Peace. We can see signs of God's kingdom all around us, knowing that we are not alone, that we are loved, and that Christ is indeed coming, not because we're ready, not because the world is ready, but because we need him. Amen.